Hello everyone, and welcome once again to Caleb Likes Books. Today I have another book review for you, and that is for Star Wars The High Republic Path of Vengeance by Cavan Scott. This is the second young adult book in the High Republic Phase 2 and the final book in Phase 2, at least as far as ones I read. There might be a middle grade book that comes after, I don't actually know for sure. But as far as the High Republic is concerned, I've been only reading pretty much the adult novels and the YA novels, so this is the last thing that I need to read in Phase 2. So, for some context before I get into this, because this is taking place in a larger series, I love the High Republic Phase 1. I don't love every single book out of the 6 that I read. I would say I loved like 4 of them, and I liked another one, and I felt pretty mediocre about the last one. But I especially loved all 3 of the adult novels and one of the young adult novels. I thought they were awesome, and it was something that I was very excited about. Going into Phase 2, I really enjoyed the first young adult book, Path of Deceit, and then the adult books I was kind of hit or miss on. I didn't really care for the first one, Convergence. I did really enjoy Cataclysm, although it didn't leave much of a lasting impact, at least not the same way that the first phase books did. So going into this one, I was hopeful that I would enjoy it, especially considering that in terms of Phase 2, this seems to be the fan favorite, aside from, it seems like Path of Deceit and Path of Vengeance seem to be the fan favorite, so I was hopeful that I would enjoy it. Plus, Cavan Scott wrote it, and he wrote The Rising Storm, which is arguably my favorite High Republic book, either that or The Fallen Star. So I was really looking forward to this, and I was really hopeful that I did enjoy it. But I hate to say, I don't think this is a bad book by any means, but I did feel like this was a disappointing last book for Phase 2. Again, not a bad book by any means, but the way that I worded this in my written review, which I feel like is very accurate to how I felt, is I was really hoping that Phase 2, even though I didn't love it all the way through, would go out with a bang, and the end of this book does. The end of this book is great, action-packed, super fun, but the book as a whole feels like Phase 2 kind of goes out more with a whimper than with a bang to me. Not a bad book or anything like that, but just did not pack the punch that I hoped it would. That said, there are some things here that I enjoyed, which will be the first things I discuss. When it comes to Phase 2, the one thing that I do love about Phase 2, of which there are frankly not a lot, most things about Phase 2 I could just kind of take it or leave it, but the one thing that I do love about Phase 2 is the Path of the Open Hand, which is basically this force cult, which is introduced excellently in Path of Deceit. I love that book. I don't love it maybe quite as much now as I did when I first read it, but I still think that was a great first book for Phase 2. Did a great job introducing the Path of the Open Hand, which is essentially kind of where the Nile came from in Phase 1, because Phase 2 is a prequel. And I've continued to love the Path of the Open Hand in this book. I think that getting their viewpoint, their worldview, their philosophy, all that stuff is really interesting. I also really enjoyed the characters within it, especially Marta Rowe, Yana Rowe, and especially her. She's probably my favorite character in Phase 2, I would guess. As well as the mother. I thought the 3 of them were very interesting in this book. I really enjoyed every scene that they had in this book to some degree, especially, like I said, Yana Rowe and the mother. I would say those 2 characters were the big standouts for me in this book, and I really enjoyed them. And I really enjoyed just kind of the dialogue, some of the dialogues in this book. Not all of it was really a hit for me, but I did enjoy a lot of the stuff that was kind of the conflict between the Path and the Jedi, because with the Path being a Force cult, they have a very unique view on the Force compared to the Jedi. They're very different. And so kind of those conflicts were very interesting, seeing them reflect on conflicts that were happening in this book or in past books or things like that were interesting. I did enjoy that about it. I also think this book has some really good action. Every action scene in this book I thought was well done, especially towards the end. The book is split into 3 parts, and part 3, which is basically just the last 100 pages of the book, is almost entirely just action, and it's really well done, and I really enjoyed it. I just think, Cavan Scott has a good way of writing action, which I think is definitely a strength of this book. And speaking of the ending, I do think the ending of this book is really, really well done. It was easily my favorite part of the book. It was the the only part of the book I would say I consistently loved. Which then brings us to negatives, unfortunately. Aside from that last 100 pages, I did not care for this book. Again, not to say it was bad or anything, I didn't actively dislike it or anything like that, but it just didn't really draw me in that much. The characters I was really invested in, of which there are only really a couple, were interesting, but still like don't hold a candle to me to the characters from phase 1. And I tried to not compare phase 2 to phase 1 too much, because I feel like, you know, it's a different story. I shouldn't compare them directly necessarily, even though they are part of the same series. But every time that I would read phase 2, including while I was reading this book, I was just wishing I was reading phase 1 or phase 3 instead. Because those characters and that story just, to me, feels more connected to me, something that I'm more invested in than this story. So it just, a lot of this book just didn't really draw me in. It felt like there were things happening, but it didn't really feel like anything that was of particular interest to me. Then again, the last 100 pages did pick up quite a bit. I did enjoy the last 100 pages, but for the most part, otherwise, just not really do much for me. And that's the bulk of my complaint with this book, is just it didn't really draw me in all that much. The one other kind of, I don't know if it's a nitpick necessarily, but the one other thing that I didn't love about this book was the revelation about the mother, which I'm not going to spoil because it's at the end. But there is, at the very end of this book, there is a revelation of the mother and her kind of motivation and things like that. And I think that the mother and the path and her leading them is very interesting. And I felt like her having a motivation is obvious. Like, there's got to be some kind of motivation. But the motivation that was provided, that is, oh, this is why you're doing this, to me felt kind of weak. It didn't feel like it was as impactful as it should have been. Like, they revealed it, and I was just like, really? That's all this is about? It just didn't work for me, unfortunately. But yeah, so that's pretty much all I have to say about this book, which really isn't much, which kind of makes sense, because this book to me was just last 100 pages aside, a whole lot of not that interesting, which is unfortunate. I really did want to love this book, because everybody else in the High Republic fandom, even people like me who don't love Phase 2 as much, seem to really enjoy this book. This one just didn't do it for me, unfortunately. I am still excited to get into Phase 3. I have Eye of Darkness on the TBR here soon, hopefully within the next few months, and I'm excited for that. But yeah, this one, once again, just didn't quite do it for me. So as far as a rating out of 10 that I'd give Path of Vengeance, I'd give it a 6.5. Like, not a bad score by any means. I would say that is approaching good. Like, to me, a 7 is a good, like, I would recommend it. So it's approaching that level, but it's still not quite there. So, you know, it's a decent, okay book. To be honest, the last 100 pages saved this from being like a 5.5 or a 6. So that did bump it up a little bit, but yeah, overall, just kind of a middling book for me. Definitely one of my least favorite High Republic books so far, which I hate to say, but that's just how it is. So that's pretty much it for this review. Let me know in the comments if you have read this book and what you thought of it, how it compares to the other books in Phase 2 for you, how it compares to Phase 1, all that kind of stuff, how it even compares to Phase 3, where you'd rank it in terms of the High Republic, all that kind of thing. Let me know in the comments. Hopefully you enjoyed it more than I did. But yeah, I'm excited to read Eye of Darkness. Like I said, I'm hoping to read that soon. So feel free to stick around for that. And hopefully I will enjoy that one just as much as I enjoyed the adult novels of Phase 1. And yeah, I'm excited for it. So that's pretty much it for this video. So thank you all for watching, and I will see you all next time.